Welcome to the Westcity podcast. We hope you are encouraged by today's message. If you want to hear more podcasts, you can access them through the Westcity website found in the description link.
Faithful one, and we are looking at this passage found 9 times in the Old Testament. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. And today I'm going to look at the God of compassion. As I said, it was found 9 times in the Old Testament, this passage. And one of the times is in the story of Jonah, when at the end in Jonah chapter 4, God doesn't destroy Nineveh as Jonah really wants him to do. Jonah says this, and he says it not as a point of praise, but as a point of complaint about God. He says, because the vine he'd been sleeping under had withered, and God was trying to teach him a lesson about how he was so upset that this vine had died, and yet he was willing for the whole city of Nineveh to be destroyed by God. And this is what he said as a complaint about God. He said, I knew you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, O Lord, take my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. Oh, come on, Jonah, toughen up, princess. But anyway, I'm not talking about Jonah today. I'm talking about a story that we're going to get to in a moment that talks, I believe, I'm going to argue that God is compassionate. But the fact is, we can read the Old Testament and you may come to a conclusion by reading the Old Testament that God isn't gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. You may actually come to the conclusion that God is hard and pernicious, quick to anger and selective in love. I looked up the word pernicious because of my incubus debacle 2 weeks ago. If you weren't here, don't listen to the podcast, please. Like, they left it in for some reason. But pernicious just means hurtful. You know, God, we could read stories, many of us maybe have, or been in a scenario in church where the picture we have of God is that he is hard and hurtful, really quick to anger, and selective in those he loves. And yet, we want to argue from the same Old Testament the opposite. So, how do you deal with these dualistic views? One person reads the same passages and can get on a corner and shout hatred at someone. Another can read similar passages in the same Old Testament and say, yes, God is compassionate, which I'll be arguing today. Well, I think we need to do, if we want to actually get an understanding like Jonah did reluctantly of the nature and heart of God, which is what this whole series is about. I think we need to read the Old Testament like the disciples did. See, the disciples, when they hung around with Jesus, came to a point in John chapter 14, verse 6, where Jesus actually declared something to them. He said, look, guys, if you've seen the Father, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you have listened to me and seen my miracles, you've seen the Father at work. In other words, I'm the clearest picture and revelation of God's heart, God's intention, and God's way. And so the disciples, when they understood that the Father and Jesus were one, that Jesus was showing them the clearest picture that humanity had ever seen what the Father looks like, what God looks like, they began to read the Old Testament and look for types of Christ. We've got to remember they didn't have a New Testament at the time, and so all they had was the Torah, the Tanakh, and the scriptures of prophets, and so forth, historical books. So they had that, and they began to look for types of Christ. I want you to imagine that. They began to read the Old Testament again, but this time they were looking to see God's heart, God's way, and God's will as revealed in Jesus and his ministry and life. They'd hung out with him for 3 years. And so can you imagine when they came across the story of Joseph, and they read how Joseph was sold into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. Can you imagine their excitement as they say, hang on, Jesus was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. This is kind of a story about the Jesus we have met, that Christ actually was revealing God, that there was this picture of God in the Old Testament we'd never seen before. I often wondered why Jesus was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver and Joseph was sold for 20. And I think it was just inflation, basically. But Joseph was sold into slavery and then saved not only the Israelites but the Egyptians as well. Jesus betrayed by Judas, and in that betrayal didn't come out defeated but came out buying us, restoring not only just the Israelites and bringing salvation to them, but for the whole world, for you and I. Can you imagine them reading Isaiah 53, where it says that surely he has borne our griefs and our sorrows. We thought he was afflicted by God, but in fact, by his stripes, we are healed. Can you imagine them reading that, looking and saying, doesn't that sound a lot like what happened in Jesus' torture as he was led to the cross, that he was whipped and he didn't open his mouth and he looked like he was cursed, because that's what you did to people who were criminals, and it was the most shaming act you could possibly do was to hang someone on a tree and strip them naked and punish and persecute them. And yet we thought maybe he was afflicted by God, but by his stripes, Jesus has shown us we are healed. Can you imagine them reading that in the Old Testament, that passage? I say they were looking for types of Christ because the stories and the people we see in the Old Testament and the passages aren't Christ, but they reveal God's heart that we see in Jesus Christ in the New Testament. Even Jonah, who was whinging and complaining, God, you're too good. Your goodness is running after me and the Ninevites. Bah humbug. He's a type of Christ. Jesus even mentions Jonah as he was in the whale for 3 days. He comes out with a message that turns around a city, and they find life and they find God and they repent. And just in the same way, the disciples said, oh my goodness, Jesus was dead. For how long? 3 days, if you didn't know, 3 days. And he comes out of death. And cities like Jerusalem, Judea, and the uttermost parts of the earth are introduced to a God who loves them and saves them, and they're turned around, and we see that in Acts. Beautiful. And so today, and I want to encourage you, I don't know how you read the Old Testament, read it, but maybe read it with the adventure, looking for the scarlet thread of where Jesus pops up in the most beautiful and bizarre and wonderful places and does the very opposite of what you think he's going to do. Today I want to look at a story, a passage, and it's found in 2 Kings. And I'm going to just read it, make some points. And like I said, argue God is compassionate. It's found in 2 Kings, chapter 6. And verse 8. Remember, I'm looking for types of Christ. I'm looking for Jesus in this. I'm looking for God's heart revealed in Jesus that we see in the New Testament. And it says this, now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with the officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such and such a place. We don't know what it is. It's top secret. He doesn't want anyone to know except his officers. The man of God sent word to the king, and that man of God was Elisha. He sent word to the king, and he said, beware of passing this place, because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king of Israel so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, will you tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? I can imagine none of them are going to, yeah, it was me. He thought there was a spy in the camp, but in fact, Elijah was like a modern day Google Maps. He just knew where the king of Syria was and would warn the king of Israel, be careful and don't go through there. So he thought, look, someone's obviously telling him. And then they said this. They said, None of us, my lord, the king, said one of his officers, but Elisha the prophet who is in Israel tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. He says, go find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. And the report came back, he is in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariot and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. Dun, 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 dun. When the servants of the man of God got up, the servant of the man of God, which is Gehazi, when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh my Lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. I wonder if that was edited. But, oh my Lord, what shall we do? Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Elisha answered, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, oh Lord, open his eyes so he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. As the enemy came down towards him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, strike these people with blindness. So he struck them with blindness as Elisha had asked. And Elisha told them, this is not the road and this is not the city. Follow me and I will lead you to the man you are looking for. And he led them to Samaria. After they entered the city, Elijah said, Lord, open their eyes so these men, so they can see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and they were inside Samaria. And when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, shall I kill them, my father? Shall I kill them? Do not kill them, he answered. Would you kill men you've captured with your own sword or bow? Yes, sometimes, but anyway. Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them, and after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away, and they returned to their master. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. This is a story about eyes, open eyes and shut eyes. So as I said, Elisha was telling the king of Israel where they were, and his servant Gehazi wakes up in the morning, and they're surrounded by these armies. And Elisha gets up and walks out, and he says, God, open the eyes of my servant Gehazi to see what I'm seeing. And it says his eyes were opened, and he saw the armies of the hosts of God, or the angelic host of God. I don't even think it says armies, it just says angelic host of God surrounding the armies of the king of Syria. I just want to take a pit stop there and just say, I don't know what you came into today and what's surrounding you, but there is something, I believe, very beautiful that in prayer, God can open our eyes to what he is doing and where he is in the midst of the stuff that we are going through. I really do. It was at the point of prayer, and we talk about prayer as if it's a magic formula. It's not. It's about just sitting with Jesus. That suddenly there was an awareness, and this view was taken in by the servant, and he could see something. My prayer for you today is that whatever you're going through, you would start to see God, because it's often in the times where it's the most dark that we think God is the least present. Jesus knew what we were going through on the cross when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? When the clouds of sin and death and hatred rolled in, even he identified with us in those moments, saying, God, where are you? It wasn't that he knew God had abandoned him. He was reflecting what it's like when you're in tribulation, that you feel abandoned. And he feels what we feel. I believe his eyes were open to see God at work in that moment. And I believe the same for today. And so Gehazi saw the water fall over. There's a lake. So Gehazi, for those who are listening to the podcast, I just kicked over my water bottle, saw this army. And then Elijah prayed again. This is another prayer around eyes. And he said, because they were rushing down, he said, Lord, hey, blind this army. And they were blinded. And it must have been so fearful for them, because here they were, the aggressors. They were in a position of incredible power and victory, and all of a sudden they're blinded. And then Elisha says, hey, you've come to the wrong place, follow me. I don't know how that plays out. Could they kind of see? Did they all just put a hand on everyone's shoulder and just followed him? I don't know how they got to where they got to. It doesn't say. Maybe they could see, so who knows? But the fact is, they were incapacitated and they wound up in front of the Israelite king, and Elisha prays a third time and he says, open their eyes. And they open their eyes. Imagine the fear, in a position to take and capture Elisha and possibly kill him. And now they were the captors. And in that moment, often we expect the redemptive violence to kick in. In fact, it's kind of that, let's get these people kind of stuff that the king puts voice to, doesn't he? Oh, my father, shall I kill them? I could just see him rubbing his hands. This is it. This is our chance. And then we hear Elijah say, no, I don't want you to kill them. I want you to prepare a table for them. I don't want you to actually strike with hatred. I want you to offer them hospitality. Sound like anyone? Sound like anyone? Sound like someone who says, pray for those who persecute you and despitefully use? Does it sound like anyone? The king it's interesting because it says give him bread and water, and it seems like the king went above and beyond and put on a feast. It actually says a feast. Imagine those guys. I mean, I'm sure some of them were like, this is a red wedding. We're going to have a meal and then it's curtains. This is our last dinner kind of thing. Imagine the disbelief, the how do you say it? The untrust, the kind of like, there's got to be a catch here. This is too good to be. Have you ever felt like that? Where it's like, there's got to be an angle and it's not good. And imagine as they were released to go and it was like, you're free. You can go back home. I think that is why we see that they were not only went home, but the king of Aram had something happen where it said they had peace from then on. Just recently, we've seen the Christchurch massacre, and a couple of weeks ago I mentioned it, and we've seen it on our TV and our news. Martin Luther King Jr. said this. He said, darkness can't drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hatred can't drive out hatred. Only love can do that. And in the midst of this massacre and hatred and discussion and rhetoric around the whole situation and tragedy of lives being lost, we kind of encounter an Elisha and the army story. And this story is not what we expect. We see hatred and violence perpetrated, and we expect anger and retribution to come back in equal force. And obviously we want justice. Justice is something God trades in. He is a God of justice. But we expect anger, we expect violence, we expect eruption. And we get shocked when Christ-like figures respond as Jesus would. Because it's countercultural. It's not the norm. It breaks the cycles of violence that we're so used to. Interestingly enough, the video I'm about to show you is a video, it's like the story of the Good Samaritan. Remember the story Jesus told the Good Samaritan? The kicker of the story of the Good Samaritan is the person that helped the guy who'd been beaten up wasn't the good Jewish man. It was the evil Samaritan man that showed love to his neighbor. I'm going to show you a video right now. And this video is of Farid and Husna Ahmed. Farid is a cripple, he's in a wheelchair, disabled. And Husna, his wife, they were in the mosque and when the gunman opened fire. And Husna, his wife, ran in to save him and others, and she was killed. And this is Farid's response. This is a Muslim man. I want you to watch it and see the beauty, but the shock in the narrative that we expect. And just let God speak to you in this moment. Not just speak to you in your head, but let him wash over you in all that you are. Thanks, guys.
Reed spoke to Newtub, hoping his wife was okay.
I don't know where my wife is. She was in the ladies' room.
The news, the worst he could imagine. She lost her life trying to save him. Tonight, people are paying their respects. Those who knew her loved her, remembering a woman renowned for kindness of her own.
Our daughter lived here with them for a year, and she was always sharing.
And despite the terrible act of hatred, Farid Ahmed has found a way to forgive the shooter.
I love him, to be honest. I think probably he went through some trauma in his life. Probably he was not loved. I don't hate him at all. I don't hate him at all. Not at all.
Forgiveness, Farid says, is what his wife Husma would have wanted.
She's brave, and she gave her life saving others.
Husma Ahmed, kind to the very end.
Now, Mike, ever since this terrible tragedy, he has been an enormous support to the people in his community. Despite breaking the most terrible, awful news to his own 15-year-old daughter, he has spent the afternoon having that conversation again and again at the Haggard College here behind me on behalf of those who feel they do not have the strength to tell their family and friends what has taken place. Some last words that he wanted all of us to think about, that if someone does bad to you, make sure you do good to them.
Shall I kill him? Nah. Give him a meal. And so today, we're going to come to a meal. And you may come here today as enemies of God, but you're invited by him to the table. You may have been brought here today by someone else, by a niece or a nephew, by a friend. And you say, am I welcome here? Absolutely. Shall I kill him? Give them a meal. And you know, today I pray that in this meal, like for the Assyrian army, you will discover a God who is compassionate and gracious and kind and slow to anger and abounding in love. And you know, I don't just pray this, I know you will. Because this is a God we see in Jesus. And so today when you come, and you come to this table, know that you're coming to He who loves you and cares for you and wants to meet you.
Each week at West City, we are sent out to be the church in the world. We do this by declaring the following benediction. May you know God's enabling as you join us in living it out. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So go and feed the hungry. Go and clothe the naked. Go and fight for justice. Go and end oppression. Go and proclaim anew the old story. Go and reach those who are running from God and God's church. Go and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, or even like us. And do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.